The tea-sipping, ripping, whipping, Spency boy back at it again. Okay, so Untamed is still fun. It is still comparable to a lot of these new arcade dirt bike games. Of course, it's not so comparable to Reflex, certain games out there, right? But I'm just going to be completely honest with you. Once I went back in here and started playing Untamed again, started messing with my tuning and, getting the bike to get that prime, like, momentum tuning and shit where you can really start carrying the speed on the bike, stiffening up the suspension. I've really went in here and done some stuff on Untamed. Takes me back to the old days. But it made me come to that realization, like, holy fuck. Like, Untamed, and even Unleashed to a certain extent, but certainly Untamed, is definitely still comparable to a lot of these modern dirt bike games, man. When you talk about strictly the gameplay and the replayability and the skill gap and the separation you can have from a beginner player, it's unbelievable. Let me just give you an example here, okay? The newest Milestone game, for example, Supercross 5, okay? It is literally impossible to pop off of the bike from over jumping, under jumping. You're never going to instantly pop off the bike in Supercross 5. So, but you can do that. Not only can you do that in Untamed, but it's like a major fucking aspect to the gameplay. It's everything to it, especially on the Supercross tracks. Like, if you don't have a good gauge on how far you can jump, to what kind of landing you have, to how stiff your suspension is, to the degree in which you would pop off or wouldn't pop off, that's literally the entire gameplay loop of Untamed. And to think that that's not even a feature, that's not even an aspect to the gameplay of Supercross 5, it really makes you sit down and scratch your head. It's like, what has happened to these arcade dirt bike games to the point to where they've got it where you can't even pop off of the bike? What is that, bro? What is that, and where the hell did that come from? I'm just so confused. It's just like, what are you doing, Milestone? What are you doing? It don't matter how much you improve the physics and the graphics and the yada, 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 this, that, and another. If you can't pop off the bike in a Supercross-only video game, then you don't really have a Supercross video game. Like, I don't understand that. If you go back to, Unleashed, Untamed, Reflex, a bunch of these other dirt bike games, even like Supercross 3 and 2, you could pop off of the bike. What has happened to that? I have no idea. But that's just one example of how, MX vs. ATV Untamed is still comparable to a lot of these newer dirt bike games. Even like when I get back into Untamed and I hit a whoop section on a Supercross track, like wide ass open, get the perfect amount of momentum in the corner, the whoops are actually somewhat tricky compared to 99% of the Milestone games. They're actually somewhat like, holy shit, the bike's hauling ass. I may flip over the bike. I'll tell you what it is. With Unleashed, Untamed, and Reflex specifically, and even a little bit into Alive, but not quite as much on Alive, it's like all of those games just had such a perfect gauge on, how far you could jump without popping off, what kind of landings you could do on the bike to where it's like somewhat realistic, but not like simulator realistic, where you pop off everywhere. It's not like that, but it's like you pop off enough to where it doesn't just feel like you can blindly hold the gas wide open across every track and not even have to think about it. You see what I'm saying? And that's what creates the rhythm complexity and the rhythm skill gap. If it's like, oh shit, if I try to jump this, 69-foot quad, am I going to be able to survive that landing? That's a constant super fun gameplay loop that you have with Unleashed, Untamed, Reflex, all those kind of games that keeps, at least for me personally, that's what keeps me coming back for more. Like if it feels like I'm going fast enough, you know, that's another thing with Unleashed, Untamed, and Reflex. They had such a good gauge on how to combine like the speed of the game with the pop-off system of the game, with the potential jump rhythms you could hit on the Supercross tracks, the way that the bike reacted over whoops or roughness. All of those things seem to have just been so much more thought out in those games than it is on a lot of the new Milestone games like MX vs. ATV Supercross. You know, it was so much more in those older games. I'm telling you, it's such a big aspect, and I've come to learn that when I go back and play Untamed. It's like, holy shit, this game is actually fun. Even though it was made back in, what was it, 2007 or some shit like that, the game is still, I'm telling you, there are aspects to Untamed that are still way more fun than, you know, Supercross 5, like MX vs. ATV All Out, MX vs. ATV Supercross. I'm telling you right now, there are still elements of Untamed that are just better. They're just better, and it's not even up for debate. You know? It's like back in those days, it felt like somebody actually played the fucking game. Somebody actually sat down and was like, damn, oh man, I think the pop-off system is a little too extreme, or oh man, I think there needs to be more of a pop-off system. You're not popping off enough. We gotta have something to keep the gameplay fun, you know? Oh man, look at the momentum you can pick up and carry. That's one of the biggest things with I don't think it was as much in Unleashed, but certainly Untamed and Reflex. Those are some of the best arcade dirt bike games that have ever been made when it comes to that going from slow to medium speed to fast to warp speed, right? There is such a difference. You actually feel like you're getting momentum. I can't tell you how many Milestone games have been made where it feels like the entire game is just one speed level. It feels like you're just going one speed. You get on the gas wide open, you go from totally stopped to wide open, and that feels almost like one speed level. You don't really feel like you're gaining momentum. You know what I'm saying? That's such a major element to Untamed and Reflex and games like that. Even Alive had a decent little momentum pickup feeling, but it's like, damn, bro. It's just, I guess the point of this video, it's just crazy when you go back and you realize how many of these core arcade dirt bike game features used to just be a staple. It used to just be like, that's what you expected. But we've had to go through all this bullshit with all these different Milestone games for Milestone to even figure out what the hell they were doing 15 plus years ago. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, what are you doing? Why is this such a struggle? You boys act like you didn't even play Unleashed, Untamed, Reflex. I mean, I swear to God, some of them dudes, I don't even know how much they've even played those games. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made so many different Milestone games where either A, you can barely even whip the bike. Good God, bro. I can't tell you the amount of... I think I even made a video on this where it was like, I'm pretty sure you can whip the bike more on Unleashed and Untamed than you can on like at least 90% of the Milestone games. Like MXGP 1, 2, obviously MXGP 3 got a little bit better with that, but like you could whip the bike so much better in those games than you could MXGP 1 and 2. It wasn't even funny. So it's just like, bro. And not only that, but the whip system, even it just goes to show you like, even all the way back in those days where you wouldn't even have necessarily expected a super complex whip system, it still had enough to it where it kept the game fun, like a like a whip system, a momentum system, a pop-off system, you know, all of these core critical pillars to a good arcade dirt bike gameplay loop, right? This is the stuff I've been trying to explain forever. And like whenever I first started playing a bunch of these Milestone games like MXGP 1, 2, you know, Supercross 1, a bunch of these different Milestone games, it's like, what are you boys even doing? What are you even doing? That shit feels like a mobile game in comparison to games that were made more than 15 years ago. Fuck talking about comparing those games to Reflex. Trust me, you don't even want to do that. But even if you go back and compare them to Untamed and Unleashed, it's like, what are you doing? I don't know. I don't understand it, but, you know. But yeah, you know, Milestone did start to figure out some things right there, like Supercross 3 area, you know, MXGP 3 area. But I swear it's like they've lost everything that they've learned, just about lost everything that they've learned going to Supercross 4, Supercross 5, you know, MXGP, you know, 2069. I don't even know what the fuck we're on now, but they're still not making the jumps big enough on the MXGP games. You barely come off the ground anywhere. That's one of the biggest things that made Unleashed, Untamed, and Reflex the best arcade dirt bike games ever, is because you actually got airtime. You actually came off the ground. It was fun. Not only did you come off the ground, but then you shit in your britches when you were like, oh, can I actually land this 120-foot jump, you know? Can I actually land this? That is such a fun element that is just so missing in so many of those Milestone games. Even like with MX vs. ATV, Supercross, and even into All Out a little bit, it's like they just struggle to find that. They're starting to get it a little bit with Legends now that they've updated the game and shit. I will give them that, but, you know, they're starting to get that momentum feeling back to the game. They're starting to get that pop-off system back to the game, but, like, there for a minute, I mean, they're in that time frame from, like, 20, like after Alive, you know, all the way up into like Supercross 3, that whole time frame there, all those years of arcade dirt bike games in there, they just struggled, dude. I'm telling you, that's going to be remembered as the lowest of lows when it comes to the history of arcade dirt bike games. I'm just telling you that right now. But like, even Untamed, though, dude, like it's fun hitting the whoop sections. It's fun trying to... Oh, and by the way, there's not even any terrain deformation. There's barely any pre-made. There is still a little bit, you know, to keep it somewhat interesting. There is even still a little bit of pre-made all the way back to Untamed. And I swear to God, 90% of those Milestone games don't hardly have any pre-made ruts, any pre-made roughness, and they also don't really have a terrain deformation system, excluding like MXGP 3. All the other ones, you can barely even think about feeling it in those Milestone games. So it's just like, bro, even when you talk about the terrain deformation or the pre-made, I swear to God, Untamed is better than 90% of those Milestone games. It's literally almost every single aspect. It's crazy, man. It's crazy, man. But anyways, Spency Boy could, you know, rant on about this shit forever. I just want you guys to never forget, you know, when this new Milestone game comes out, or this whatever arcade dirt bike game comes out, never forget all of those pillar critical arcade dirt bike game features and elements that you've just come to expect and know. It's kind of like, let me give you a good example here. It's kind of like when Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the original, you know, they've had like 69 of those, but the original all the way back in 2007, bro, that was a legendary time for gaming. Like that 2005 to 2010, that was so legendary, bro. The Call of Duties, the Halos, the fucking, all of it, dude, was so amazing. The dirt bike games, all of it. But even back in those days, like, once Call of Duty came out with that, create a class, camos on the weapons and all that type of shit, then it just became a staple. It's like that just became the norm for first-person shooters from that point forward. That just became the norm. And it's the same way with the dirt bike games. Once they developed themselves to the level where they were able to start having proper pop-off system, whip systems, terrain deformation systems. Once they had all that with Unleashed, Untamed, and Reflex, we should have never lost those things. There should have never been able to have been another arcade dirt bike game that didn't at least have those different features, somewhat to those levels. Spency boy burping his head off. Oh, man. Oh, bro, T's hitting good. So, you know what I'm saying? But yet, that's what I'm saying, though. Milestone will come out with those different games with the flashy graphics and the official stadiums and all this horse shit, but then that disguises the fact that they don't have proper terrain deformation, they don't have proper whip system, they don't have proper pop-off systems. I mean, the list just goes on and on. They don't have proper momentum system. They don't have proper skill gap when you go over the whoops. The list just goes on and on and on of like, holy shit, we're a whole nother, almost 2 decades later. And it's like, yeah, you need to wake up to this shit.